Hello, hello, and welcome to this edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ray. With me, as always, is my man Seth. Seth in the Price Benowitz headquarters today, because I see a UPenn thing there on the board on the wall behind you. How's your week going? You've been traveling recently.
It's been a crazy go. I got the BluShark Summit. I had the NTL with the whole rollout of the BluShark transaction, and then the Price Benowitz Summit on Friday. It is a whirlwind, just preparing for John Fisher and the Mastermind Experience in Puerto Rico next week.
God, you are nonstop, but that's a wonderful thing. But I want to talk to you. I know you're go go go. Me, I'm stop stop stop. But anyway, in fact, I just started looking at some speaking stuff in the coming year, and I'm like, oh God, I got to travel like 3 times. But I'll get through it. I'll just big buffers in between.
Whenever Jay speaks, there's always good buzz when Jay speaks.
Especially when I speak in Colorado and states that have legalized THC, right? That's where
there you go.
Right. So I want to talk to you about Florida because you were down at NTL, and I got to figure that private equity was the talk of the town because it's coming fast, it's coming for PI, and so it seems like that was probably a main topic among the people buzzing outside the lectures, and of course, a couple of presentations about it.
Right. It was so. Look, personally, it was sort of like the public announcement of the BluShark herringbone transaction. So high fives, congratulations. It felt like a coronation. What I was concerned about as being, oh, you're being destroyed was, oh my God, look at the firepower behind you. It was very cool to see. But
very cool.
What's ironic, as old as new news as that, almost it's old news, right? Private equity in the marketing space, not news. Private equity in the legal space is news. For years, Andrew Finkelstein was talking about non-lawyer ownership. We saw Arizona, with their ABS, play. And all of a sudden, I thought this was, not yet here. It is here. The private equity world is full on into the personal injury space. I could say the legal space, but we both know it's really focused first and foremost, the lion's share there. But the Chad Dudley DeBosier announcement, that private equity is taking a position with a managed service organization. For those of you that don't know that, it's basically the back office that, all of the non-lawyering piece, which both of us run for our firms. The idea is private equity is coming and saying, hey, we're going to run your intake, your accounting, your finance, your collections, your marketing, all of the non-legal piece, and that will sit below the lawyering. I think it's analogous to what you've seen in the medical space. There's not a single dermatologist that has not been rolled up because, frankly, they were not particularly good at those things. They all put a managed service organization in place, and it is their way of getting around the. Now, again, ethically, everybody's telling, it's good. I think the jury is still out, but people are telling me it is locked and loaded. But the Chad Dudley news, Dudley DeBosier news, huge thought leader, maybe the smartest guy, certainly 50 and under in the space. He is brilliant. For him to take a move like this shows that this is not just on the fringes. It's Main Street, and he clearly wanted to be a platform player in what he's doing. But to me, this was massive seismic shift within the legal space from talk and anecdote to it's here.
Yeah, so I wonder, for the PI people, PI is great to bring in private equity because you can value cases, you can identify opportunities for real sort of economies of scale, right? You can do that. And I know, at least in my state, I file a personal injury lawsuit, I have a clear timeline of where things are going and the like. I don't know if that necessarily translates to areas like family law, where, you could have very agreeable spouses going through a divorce or very disagreeable spouses, or agreeable turns into something. And so you may not necessarily have the same ability to handicap profitability on cases. I know it certainly doesn't happen in criminal context because
I would, yes and no. PI firms run, I'd say, incrementally more business-like than non-PI firms.
Absolutely, and I think they're the most business-like, and I think that's what makes it easy.
Well, I think you look at yes, but what about counterpoint, which is given the non-rational business players in the criminal space who don't know what they want, right? What I've seen at BluShark, I can't unsee. I have a criminal place that came in for BluShark. We got them LSAs. They were 10, 15 days into working with us. And all of a sudden they're like, this sucks. We want our money back. We don't like the quality of the LSAs. I'm like, I'm not Google. My point is, that's the level that I'm playing at, that there are people that don't even understand what is an agency and what is Google media. So in one sense, margins may be less, agreed, but the inefficiencies within these criminal firms, from marketing to everything else, I think leaves, if you imagine, if you talk a lot about like the old time lawyers, if they could just be left to lawyering, if these guys can figure out how to efficiently do the back end and allow lawyers to be lawyers, they're not just criminal, criminal because the criminal mastermind, but I mean, how many of those people, if you said, hey, do you let this guy continue running his operations and marketing, or have somebody who runs everything by the numbers do it? 19 times out of 20, you're like, I'd rather have the latter.
I mean, yeah, but I think, I think the nature of the people that are that align with criminal defense are sort of anti-government types that want to do everything on their own. I think I'd be curious if private equity thinks that either family law or maybe immigration, and they may be avoiding immigration with the current political climate, but immigration is a practice area that is in all 50 states. It is very form driven and I think that there probably has the most opportunity.
100%.
For
saw money
equity
going there through the ABSs. I think all bets are off. What's happened under the current political administration changed everything. Like, we have a lot of dear friends in the immigration space that are dying on the vine right now. It is not good.
Right. I mean, it's amazing. We have a job posting up, and all we're getting is associates from immigration firms that are saying we're going to get laid off because we don't have enough work.
Right. And the people that were doing the crimmigration, to me, that was always, I hate to be snarky, but I had never seen a successful business model in that space. It was people that loved what they did God's work, but it was a very difficult place to scale and make real money. Again,
I think the problem with crimmigration is that you've got a foot in two different canoes. And so, you're not able to sort of focus.
Yeah, no,
like that.
Yeah, I do. But I think you're exactly right that until this seismic political change came, that immigration was right. And you saw people who had crapped out on mass torts were saying, hey, I can make a quick buck doing this because it's scalable. There was a group within Arizona ABS that had, I remember hearing, they had 3 lawyers. I don't know if it was just the DC market or beyond, and they were doing free consultations, which is not the old model. They pay a lawyer to do 18, 19, consultations a day. And that person signed 1 or 2 cases a day. And that was their model. They did high volume pay-per-click that fed to that. And that's a business. That's a widget. We always talk about widgets. That's a solid widget. And so if you in the criminal space, you have the widget, you have the charge. It's a little bit more murky. But on the lower dollar criminal, is it any different than, look, we've seen like Cordell and Cordell scale family. I don't love how they've done it per se,
But they've done it.
But that said, they have been successful at getting that number significant. And now the question is, if you can centralize things like marketing, accounting, all of operations, all of a sudden, the piece that we don't see in our world is things being run intelligently. And as I see the masterminds, particularly in the PI space, the sharing and best practices, when I look, it pivots to our next topic. For instance, we just did this massive Price Benowitz Summit. We've had the last 2 years that were like half days in office. This was a neutral off site where we had 3 keynote speakers, including Bill Biggs on culture. We had a sales trainer come in, Rob Lime, we may have talked about on the show before. And
I think he was on the show.
And Peter Shankman, who's the futurist of BluShark. He came in and gave a kick-ass big picture customer service keynote that went over amazingly, and then breakouts to discuss, what the rocks are for 2026. It was an awesome day. These are things that take me 20 years to evolve to, taking a day away, putting people in a room, thinking about how do we move things to the next level. Not cheap. Flew people in from around the freaking globe, right? All over Latin America. A
Yeah.
dozen plus people from Latin America, flown, hotels, meals. It's not nothing. But the idea that's there. So all of a sudden, we're doing things, and in the business world, no big deal, right? On-sites are part of regular
Part of the
business.
job.
In the legal space, it's like, no, I'll have some guy in the Philippines for 10 years and never meet him. The idea is, is bringing these best practices something. You are 100% right. I don't see the smartest money coming to PI to non-PI first, but we're burying our heads in the sand if we don't think that there's going to be a play coming. And in fact, I took a meeting at NTL with a group that was already playing in the non-PI space. I didn't love how they set it up as at least their opening salvo. But that said, their goal was an amalgamation of firms with best practices, a little bit more amorphous than I'm sure what the Chad Dudley platform will be, to then gain firms in every market and create this juggernaut.
Yeah, I wonder if if you are a successful non-PI law firm owner, if you can make yourself more attractive to private equity, more attractive to by setting up an MSO, or getting yourself ready by acquiring other firms, bringing all your intake into an operations center, having the right finance team, having the right HR people, and being able to do that over multiple offices, multiple brands that you've brought together. And you will become then on the front end of when they've eaten all the PI that they can eat, because what's left are solos and small shops that never really get to the revenue numbers that private equity wants. Then they'll look to other niches in law, and
And
you can make yourself more attractive if that's what your end game is.
yeah, and I would say, by analogy to other industries, right now the smart money is taking out 10 million plus EBITDA law firms. That's what I'm hearing. They may be tucking in more over time,
Right.
right?
But will they have to get to 5 million?
No, no,
You
that's not my point. I guess my point is the flagships are going to be there. Then they're
right.
going to be finding, and as I've learned more about private equity, it is all driven by EBITDA, the way that they operate, and that I would say I'm less concerned about you creating an MSO per se, because the whole point is they're coming to not, so you don't need that. Not that you don't want it, because you need it to get to there. But I would say, and this goes to sort of the actually, ironically, the third topic I want to talk to you about today, which is sort of profitability, which is you are going to be judged on your EBITDA and slotted accordingly, so that if you're sitting there saying, hey, I'm doing 4 million in revenue, but I'm only at a 15% profitability, that's not going to be as interesting to people as if you're at 3 million, but you have a 30% profitability. The
Sure.
idea, and that, I have been struggling. We spent the last 3 or 4 years at Price Benowitz really pushing the PI piece, where it's just about, caught up to the rest of the firm. At the same time, very bluntly, I'll be open here. We took our eye off the criminal family, and did not, we're not as tight as we needed to, and allowed turnover not to keep those selling units in place. And so it just shows you, like, none of this is easy, and this at a mid-sized to larger firm, that, as you're doing this, it's easy to sort of say, hey, this is going great, but take your eye off intake for too long and you're going to be screwed. Take your eye off, training and developing your lawyers for too long, you're going to be screwed. It's each of these things has to be done in concert. And if anything isn't working, the numbers don't lie. And when profitability drops, it's humbling.
Yeah, well, I'm interested because your firm itself is one of the last remaining. Like, you've got a large PI, that's 50% of your revenue, but you also have family and criminal, And it doesn't look like private equity is looking for your type of firms. They're looking for the PI shops, right?
Correct. And I'm not ready to go now. I had one
Right.
nice.
Oh, I'm not saying that you are,
No,
but
no, no, no. But I would say I think you're exactly right, and that it is a cleaner platform is what they're going to want for whatever they're doing,
I
and
mean, you
that
could theoretically spin off your PI to
anything's
get that
possible.
acquired.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think you have to be careful what you ask for. I know that the deal that Chad does looks incredible as a platform play. But what I'm seeing at some of the downstream guys, I'm telling you what they're offering publicly. I'm sure the actual deal you get is better, but that if somebody's offering a, a 3, 4, let's say a 5x multiple, which are, if you get up to 5, that's not a crazy place by today's standards. I'm sure Chad did better. But that if you're doing a third up front, a third in 3 years, and a third rolled into equity, you're putting all your eggs in the roll-up basket. It's just not that
Right.
exciting.
Right.
And then you're betting on this amalgamation of EBITDA, which again, that's how this stuff works. But if it's not done smartly, and somebody has to want to buy it. We're seeing all the AI giants in the legal space with these crazy billion-dollar valuations. Is there anybody today that's going to pay $1 billion for it? And so the question is, you can have all the valuation you want, you can have all the multiples of EBITDA you want, but somebody has to actually come and give you money for it.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is going to be a challenge going forward. Is that there are only so many dollars out there, especially with borrowing costs as high as they are right now. And I think I don't know if, unless you are in that 10%, 15% of PI firms, I don't know if the next 10 years, I mean maybe 10, the next 5 years, someone's going to knock on your door and give you an obscene amount of money for your firm. They may,
No, I think no, because it's all based on. I think the thing about the law firm, it's never ideal, and I don't want Jay sitting on a beach because we know it's going to devolve. But I think that it's going to be a while for the non-PI guys to have a situation where they can't make themselves dispensable and have other people run to court. That the earn now. There's some tax advantages depending on your state, meaning long-term capital gains that you would get from a transaction. I get that's a huge benefit. And so that gives you some additional value in what they're offering you. But the idea that you're losing control, especially if it's not 100 cents on the dollar, where you're not getting the full thing because they're only buying a percentage of the firm, to give up so much control without a meaningful amount. I think the argument has to be, is it worth not just running the firm for X number of years? I think they're targeting people that are towards the end and don't have a succession plan. Fine. But for the average person, what is Jay going to do without his firm? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, my move is simply hire the right talent in management, take a little bit of a haircut on what my profit is, and not have to sell it out. I mean, that's I think that was my move. But I wanted to run a question by you because I could use your advice on something. Talking about having remote workers and not meeting them. Cool thing happened for one of my remote workers this weekend. His son is in the 50-meter freestyle in the Philippines and won at I don't think he was very close to a new record in the Philippines.
Wow.
And is expected to be in the Olympics in 2 years, which I believe are in Los Angeles. So he's already said, I want to come to the United States and see my son. And so I'm like, well, if your son's in the Olympics, we're coming out to watch and we're going to cheer for him. So that'd be pretty cool. But I had a question for you and to ask you how you deal with this. We had a remote worker in a South American country brush back on their raise. They got a 5% raise this year. We told everybody that the raises were going to be anywhere 3 to 5% is what our normal is. And when you do your job well, you get 5%. I mean, they still get annual bonuses. They're overseas in South America, so they get their aguinaldo. That comes every year, and that's part of their package. But when they got a 5% raise this year, they said, I thought I was worth more to this company. I only got 5%. And they say,
Yeah, and I think first I just had the amazing opportunity to spend time and break bread, and we had a final brunch at my house that was just awesome. We had 15 international people from Latin America that were in, And it was the talent level. Oh my God. I was, lawyers from Columbia that were just rock stars, born in a different zip code. They would be, this is a guy who would own us both.
Yeah.
And they do amazing work. I think of several things. First, and I analogize this to the same issue we've talked about with associates. You bring a person, they graduate law school. They're a law clerk, they graduate law school, they pass the bar. Historically, the number we always threw out there was the over under 60, 65 grand. And in 9 to 12 months, the market looks at them as worth 90 to 110. And you're like, you're the same schmuck I just paid 60,000 to. What the hell? Right? I think that we are in that same moment, that the world that we are living in, that a year with Jay Ruane makes this person go from, if you're direct hires, or are these through a service?
These are direct hires.
Direct hires. So, anywhere from $6 to $8 an hour to start generally. Is that fair?
So, I mean, right now, I think she's making 30,000 American a year.
Well, that's 15 an hour. That's not 6 to 8. Yeah. So if it's 15 an hour, that's a whole different game.
I mean, she's a lawyer in Argentina.
No, understood. Yeah. But a lot, so if you are really at a $15 an hour number, that's different. But I think what's happening is that at different skills and different jobs, I'll tell you our story. We started in the market was $5, $6 an hour. That's what all of these national third-party groups were paying them, and then marking them up to 12, which is why I had trouble working with some of the third-party groups, because I wanted the person to be at market. If you're paying 12 and the person's getting 5 or 6, and it gives a lot of ability for them to leave. So me, I'd rather be paying them 10, not of the third-party service. They're making 20 a year at some, for instance, for a non-lawyer position, and be able to retain. So I think that you need to remove, at least short term, the market is not developed enough, and you are adding enough value that you need to think of this not as a paralegal in the US where what market is, and look, if it wasn't for a cost of living adjustment, it's not like they could go somewhere else and make more, hypothetically.
Right.
If you're paying your paralegal 70, could they make somewhere more? Yeah, they might. But that if they get their 3 to 6% adjustment, whatever it is, year over year, it puts them in a good stead. And that in 3 years, they'll be at numbers. And we have to be careful because that may get them to numbers that are untenable. I think we have to look at it differently rather than a percentage increase. I really think we have to look at this as what is market and that it's developing. I saw this in the Philippines that, there was a period where $2 to $4 an hour was something that was acceptable. And there's enough competition, the cream has risen to the top. And we're seeing people demand $10 an hour plus, which is good for them, but it's not a 3% raise. That if you do that, it's a risk factor for retaining the talent if you really want to keep it. Now, you also may say, hey, my training program is good enough. I'm comfortable at this number. And if I lose somebody, I'm fine. But make no mistake that the market is moving north.
Yeah, I mean, it's moving incredibly north. The pushback we got was, well, inflation has gone crazy in our country and the buying power isn't there. And so a 5% raise isn't enough to keep up with my living expenses when inflation in my country is 15% this year. And
right. Well, I think what they're saying, that look, in one sense, it's not your problem, but in one sense, it is. And so let me ask you a question. Did you get a number from them? Person?
This is an email I woke up to this morning, and so I delegated to my manager.
And I think, like everything, a conversation is needed. Sometimes it's like you look at it, it is a 12% increase instead of a 3% increase, maybe. Or it just may be that dollars were at there and the way the market has moved that, when we talk about $1 an hour raise or a 50 cents an hour raise, that's a lot more than 3% as a percentage on a smaller amount. But that, I think that you almost have to check that, because we have a more of a stable economy here, whereas we're sort of creating that there. And sadly, or positively, and I'll take the latter and to make it half empty, we are dealing with a situation where people are now, for good for them, showing value in a market. Some of these big aggregators that have done a decent job of training but weren't great to their people, we see the resumes all the time now where they're coming in trained. And so the question
I think it has more value to you if they're coming in trained.
Yeah, look, it's also, are they trained your way or not? There's issues with that. But the fact is they know what they're getting into at least. I mean, one of the biggest risks we all have, when you hire your lawyer, I want to go back to the government, I want to do this, is do they want to do it? They know what the deal is. So if the truth is they're going to be a paralegal at a U.S. law firm and you treat them well and we treat them as a team member, et cetera, that to me means it's a huge advantage. And that, I'm going to sort of land the plane with, yes, we want to keep adding money to it to make sure we retain great talent. But something I saw at BluShark on the other end is you can get fat and happy with expanding it too much because it seems so cheap. And all of a sudden it's eating into EBITDA, even though it is reasonable. And I still would rather have 3 amazing offshore people than one person below the subsistence line here that's going to cause drama and issues, et cetera.
Sure.
But it's not a free lunch. And that if you're not careful with keeping that in check and being efficient, you're going to have issues in the other direction.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and it's just something that I had not expected. It's something that I woke up on Monday morning to, but it's certainly something that my leadership is starting to deal with, and I think it's something that you need to be aware of, and maybe you need to outline this when you onboard somebody in your offer letter, saying, and customary raises are in this range, so they come in with open eyes, right? And yeah, so maybe in their country there was a 20% normal raise every year, but that's because the currency had devalued so much and people needed to keep them, and maybe that's something that I need to consider and take a look at but then I look at some people and say, okay, if I look at ChatGPT or Google or whatever and say, I know I'm paying you X, and if I put that into these these websites and they tell me that you're in the top 5% of people earning incomes in your country, I think I'm taking care of you. Okay.
I only have one situation I know of personally where I think that I'm probably overpaying for what I have based on longevity and institutional knowledge. Generally, it has been a solid deal, and that, I'm less concerned with what somebody could make there, but what the value they're adding to me. I think that as we move away, I mean, I preach it. They're not VAs; they're international team members.
Right.
As you see it, and what I really felt this last long weekend with our international team members is that if you build and develop these people, there's very little they can't do, and that it's just a global economy. Depending, looking at the entire planet, rather than here's cheap labor in this particular country. That it's not like, hey, I'm going to the Philippines because it's cheapest, but like, where can I find people? If you have a job for X, social media assistant to you, where on the planet is the best person? And knowing that if it's not in the US, it's likely to be a lot less, that all of a sudden and I think that what's interesting is to see, I'd love to see how the cruise ships do it, because they have people from all over the world and they pay accordingly. They have local agencies hiring, they pay according to where it is, but it's very clear. I was on a Virgin trip, and the Virgin cruise, and they clearly were paying a notch more and getting people who were a notch more personality wise, more
Right.
than on the other ships, which they wanted. I have not done the high end, Vikings and Oceanas that my in-laws do, but I'm sure that they have figured out a way that within that world, if they offer X amount more, they're getting the next level. They'll be able to choose from different people. And that I think that we're sort of dealing with a similar piece, which is, within one country, if you're fixated on that, it's one thing. But I think that what you're seeing, especially what I see with private equity, is if you're looking at the entire globe as your hiring universe, it changes things. Goes back to why we are so dismayed that we have to find a Connecticut or a Virginia barred criminal lawyer. We have to, because they have to go to court. We have no choice. But that's the pain point and our limiting factor on some of our growth.
Yeah, it's crazy. As we work on our firms, we find a solution of remote talent. We find, and it seems to be working, and even that is going to have wrinkles and bumps and issues that come up. Folks, this isn't easy. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. We're a unique bunch of people that are entrepreneurs in the legal space, and these are all the factors that you need to start thinking about as you grow and as you scale your operation, whether it's with a private equity exit plan, whether it's just pass it down to somebody, whether it's to sell internally. These are all the things that we need to worry about and be thinking about now so that we can address them later. And that's why we have this dialogue every week or so, Seth and I, so that we can talk out in the open and have these therapeutic sessions. So thank you all for being with us today. That's going to be another wonderful episode of the Law Firm Blueprint. I am Jay Ruane. He's Seth Price. We love having you. See us every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, live on Facebook, in our Facebook group, The Law Firm Blueprint, and live on LinkedIn. I got nothing else, Seth. You got anything else?
No, I appreciate you. This is good. I mean, again, I know we get great feedback from the audience, better and better, over the years. But to be able to think through these things and talk about huge value for me personally. I appreciate the platform we have here.
And if you got anything out of today's episode, please go into your podcast player and give us a 5-star review, because the more, the better. It helps our distribution. I appreciate that. That's going to do it for us. Bye for now.